Welcome to ThinkTech Global. I'm Jay Fidell. We're going to do midnight in Brussels now with Gauri Khandekar, who is with FRIDE, which is a think tank in Europe. That's FRIDE. It has an office in Brussels and also an office in Madrid. Welcome again to the show, Gauri. It's always nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Jay. It's my pleasure.
We wanted to catch up on things in Europe, see the good and the bad, see what's happening, get a feeling for what it's like among the countries in the EU anyway. And so we're calling this News from the East. And you told me about some of the things that are happening. I'd like to go down those things. The first thing you mentioned was happening, which is of some concern, is the shooting in Copenhagen. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, well, it was a lone wolf attack, as they say, a single radicalized young male, Muslim male, who went with a firearm and shot at a cafe in Copenhagen where there was a free speech debate going on. And the author or the cartoonist who had drawn a picture of Prophet Muhammad as a dog in 2007 was attending this debate. And so he opened fire and sprayed around 200 bullets. Thankfully, there were not many casualties. There was one film director who died, unfortunately. But then he did also go on to towards a Jewish bar mitzvah that was taking place and shot a Jewish guard outside it. And then the attacker was shot. But again, you know, this comes harking back to the Charlie Hebdo attacks that took place earlier this year, and it's again this kind of Islam religious debate, anti-Semitism, and the whole kind of picture that's evolving in Europe.
You know, it strikes me that the anti-Semitism we're talking about is not by the native Europeans, it's by the Muslims who live in Europe, and they're, you know, going to be anti-Semitic wherever they are. And I'm wondering if my impression is true, that these incidents, especially the ones involving murder and mayhem, are always by either lone wolves or groups of Muslims. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, the whole debate now in Europe is that these people are not real Muslims, and they're radicalized, and it doesn't really represent the real religion of Islam. Now, that is true to a certain extent, but also it's under this umbrella of Islam, or the interpretations of Islam that it's happening under, and theological debate on this issue, which is a theological issue. I don't think you can get any further. And you're right in saying that nowadays you do see these anti-Semitic attacks, or whatever you call it, intimidation as well, that happens, and it's mainly from either the Muslim or the immigrant community. Actually, just this morning, coincidentally, I was at a post on Facebook, and she showed, and the video showed a young man who, a Jewish man walking through Paris, and he was abused verbally, and it was mainly people from an immigrant background, and it's somewhat telling nowadays. I would think. But again, you cannot just single them out, and there is an underlying anti-Semitic sentiment in Europe, which, given Europe's history, you can feel.
No, that's troublesome. Yeah. You know, I mean, the whole thing seems to be polarizing. I mean, we had 3 young students, Muslim students, killed in the South, murdered by in a hate crime, and so it seems to be going in all directions. I think what the American Jewry is concerned about is in Europe is that the ordinary European people, you know, get involved as in that wave, that underlying anti-Semitism that you spoke of, sort of gets stimulated by all of this. That would be great concern. I mean, you expect it from the Muslims as part of their culture, actually, and if ordinary Europeans begin to get or feel more anti-Semitic, that's great concern. Do you feel that's happening?
Well, I think it's more anti-Islam that's gaining speed across Europe than anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism. So I think it's more to do with the growing frustration about Islam and Islam's place in Europe. I think that's what people are more vocal about, especially the Pegida movement in Germany, where you had hundreds of thousands of German citizens coming out on the streets and saying that Islam has no place in Europe and they don't want an Islamization of Europe. And this has been an issue for many politicians even, and one of the most famous is Geert Wilders of the Netherlands, who has spoken out about interpretation of Islam that is violent and radical and anti-European.
You know, it strikes me the press has a lot to do with fanning the flames on this sort of thing. I mean, in the case of Ferguson, Missouri, where there was a killing of a young black man by a policeman, I think the press had a lot to do with making people excited about that. I wonder what the press is doing here on this issue. Is the press exciting it? Is the press accelerating the polarization? What's your feeling about whether the press is being responsible?
Jay, I agree with you completely that the press has a major role and a responsibility to some extent, you know. Unfortunately or fortunately, this is not the same case in Europe as it was in the US with the killing of the black youth. In Europe, because there are so many multiple crises going on at the same time, political, security, economic, I think there is a mix. It's not the main preoccupation, let's say, but the press does play a positive role in the sense that given Europe's history, given the line that the governments have taken after the World War, the Second World War, I mean, saying that, you know, this is not what we want to do again. We don't want war in Europe again, and the main the ideology behind the creation of the European Union was never to have this kind of destruction again, this death again. And I think press follows the same line to a large extent, and they've mainly been against these movements. So I don't think they would. It's not a matter of justice, let's say, as happened in the shootings in the US. It's not a matter of who's right and who's wrong. It's just wrong here, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think they've played a different role.
Well, after we cover some more of these stories, I want to ask you your reaction about how things are doing in general in the EU. But let's move on to the Ukraine. So there's a peace deal in the Ukraine, and that's a good thing. That Merkel, Hollande, and Putin all were able to get together. Did that run smooth, or was that a difficult negotiation? And will it stick?
Well, finally, after marathon talks, they did manage to hammer out a peace deal, a ceasefire. It's largely a ceasefire wherein both sides are supposed to stop firing at each other, which, you know, it's not really that effective, and you do have fire from both sides still, but it's getting into place. Now, the main trigger for this peace deal has been the United States' intention to arm the Ukrainians, and this really pushed the Russians, for one, to move towards a peace deal, but it really frightened the Europeans because this was something that Europe did not want. An aggressive Russia would not attack the US for arming the Ukrainians, but look towards Europe. And the Europeans simply cannot deal with that at the moment, especially. So it was really well done, especially by Chancellor Merkel of Germany, And of course, President Francois Hollande was there as well. But they did manage, and that's been the most positive news, at least in the past 2 weeks.
Well, that's encouraging because what was happening before was really a devolution into a state of nature over there. I mean, a relatively civilized area was being made into rubble. But I wonder what this teaches us. I mean, is this a scenario, do you think, that Putin has been sort of playing out? Is this something that he planned to do, that ultimately would result in an agreement, but in the meantime, he has a greater foothold in Ukraine? Is that what's happening?
Jay, the entire thing started because Europeans really underestimated Putin. It's the big underlying current was that there was a large underestimation of Putin and Russia and what Russia could do if Europe or the European Union expanded eastwards. And Russia has traditionally seen Ukraine and Belarus as kind of buffer states between NATO and itself. So it did not want NATO to expand its borders or the European Union. And once the EU started to court Ukraine to turn more westwards towards the European Union, that was an open challenge to Putin, and he took it up. I mean, it's nothing for Russia, which has one of the largest armies in the world. It's still so focused on, and it's a prestige issue for Putin. So he wouldn't have let down at all. It was an open challenge.
Mm-hmm. So does he come out better for this? I mean, I know for a long time people were saying he's a real bum, but it sounds like maybe now he's a diplomat.
Well, the peace deal aside, his ratings have been the highest in his own country. I mean, they have been promoting peace in Ukraine and criticizing Russia against, its role in eastern Ukraine and in Donetsk in particular. But he's a hero for his country. He got back parts of territory which the Russians thought they would never get back. But now peace is necessary, and I think it's in Putin's geopolitical interest to have this kind of mini Cold War scenario going on between Europe and Russia, and it keeps the border strong between NATO and Russia.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this will happen again? Do you think there's another Ukraine incident in the wings here?
Yes, I don't think it's resolved as yet. I don't think there's a solution, and I think Putin will now prefer the status quo. That is this kind of smoldering Ukraine with no clear border and that constant threat, because what's happening is that the country is in danger of splitting up, and if Ukraine decides to go more pro-West towards the European Union, he can just ignite it at will.
Yeah.
And I think this is working out perfectly for Putin.
We've heard that he wanted to strengthen his buffer with NATO, with the NATO border. But are there other places along the Russian, Eastern Europe border that have the same configuration? Belarus, for example. Is there any other place that occupies the same strategic benefit for him or detriment as Ukraine? Will this happen in other places?
Well, what happened in Abkhazia and in Georgia in particular, Ossetia and Abkhazia, the territories in Georgia. But Ukraine and Belarus have been the two main important buffer states because most of the gas and energy passes through them. And they are Slavic countries, and these are countries which have had many politicians that have been managed, let's say, by Putin. So I think these are the two strongest, the states most strongly controlled by Putin, or Putin is most attached to.
One more thing about the deal, and then we'll go to a break, is that in this deal, you have Merkel and Holland, apparently cooperating to try to make a deal. They worked hard at it. They've achieved a deal. Does this work, how does this work in the interest of France and Germany? Should they be happy about the result?
Well, mainly it's just Angela Merkel running the show in Europe. I mean, the tables have turned so much in the last 70 years that Germany is now becoming the savior of Europe. It's really ironic, but it's a good irony. And of course, President Hollande tagged along with her in a way, if I can, be non-diplomatic and take the liberty to say this. But it was Chancellor Merkel all the way, and they do represent a very united Europe. I mean, it's in the EU's interest, it's in the European Union as a whole's interest that there be peace in Ukraine. So economically and strategically, it's in both France and Germany's interest, but also the entire of the European Union.
Okay, sounds like at least to some degree a win-win-win. Let's take a short break, Gauri, and then we'll come back and talk about Greece. We need to know about Greece and the settlement there and why it has failed. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute and host on Ahana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ahana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ahana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ahana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
We're back, we're live, we're doing Midnight in Brussels here at ThinkTech. We're talking about news from the East with our favorite person in Brussels and also in Madrid. We'll talk about that too, Gauri Khandekar with the think tank in Europe called FRIDE, F-R-I-D-E, which has offices in both cities. In any event, we'd like to talk about Greece now. One of the things of interest that's happened in the last couple of weeks in Europe is the deal that everybody was hoping for Greece. The deal where Greece would take on some austerity measures and try to make what we call economic peace with the rest of the EU. But it failed. So what happened, Gauri?
Well, I think the entire deal comes with the background of what this anti-austerity new Syriza party wants is no austerity, reverse the reforms, and no more of these debt payments, and to basically wipe out Greece's debt, and which none of the EU member states want to agree on anything, any of these decisions. What they are asking, what Varoufakis, who's the Greek finance minister now, is asking is for a haircut in which Greece's debt, which is hundreds of billions of dollars, would be wiped out. And the government is concurrently reversing all the reforms that have been, most of the reforms that have been put in place, painful reforms. So I think it's really a no-go principle for other EU member states, but there are talks that there could be a deal and Germany would perhaps compromise.
Well, I guess Germany went a fair distance here. Germany wants to have a deal with Greece. I guess all of Europe, but especially Germany wants to have a deal with Greece. So it must have been willing to compromise to a substantial degree. But it sounds like the recalcitrant party here, tell me if I'm right, the recalcitrant party is Greece, because Greece has a political thing going where people don't want to do austerity. Even though that would be a better, solution, they like to continue their flagrant ways.
You're completely right. The Greek people are tired of austerity. They don't want to live poor lives in a way, they've not seen poverty, especially after the growth period in Europe and, when they had the euro. So they don't want to go back to these ways. But coincidentally, the German taxpayer that has paid, that has footed the bill, let's say, of this crisis that Greece is going through and has been going through since 2008. So I think it's too much to ask for, honestly, to just wipe out the deal. And what the Greeks have been saying, and even the new Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has been saying that Germany owed Greece wartime returns.
Oh no, really? After all these years.
Exactly, like around 150 billion euros, and Greece said, no, there's no way. We've done that all. It's all been paid for after the reunification of Germany, and documents have been signed. But the new government keeps on asking for that, and I think that's something shocking still. I mean, to ask for reconstruction and funds from World War II now, it's incredible.
It's not constructive. It's not a constructive way to negotiate anything.
That cannot be part of a real political negotiation. But I think the main issue is the haircut, which means wiping off the debt, and the reversing the reform measures, which really the EU Troika, which has been the European Central Bank, the European, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Commission President, and they've all sat together and they've hammered out these reforms painstakingly, and the new government just wants to reverse that.
Really too bad. Very destructive stuff. So, if I'm Germany, I would want to go back to the table and try to resurrect these negotiations. I would try to revisit them because I would imagine that the consequences of no deal are going to be huge.
Yes.
Is Germany doing that? Do you think, Gauri, that there's a chance of cutting a deal now, or is this going to just devolve into an argument?
Well, the thing is that Chancellor Merkel has been really patient. She's I think, a real diplomat, and she really thinks in the most pragmatic terms. So she has been willing to negotiate even on these terms, with the new Greek demand. She has been willing to negotiate, to hammer out a deal. But I really think that the danger is that if Greece does not agree to settle for something, there could be tough consequences, which could also include a Greek exit from the euro, and that's not something that can be ruled out for now,
Yeah.
Because the Greek economy is really doing poorly. It does not meet the basic criteria for being in an economic zone like the European Union, and the debt is frankly been than what the treaties have prescribed. So.
Well, it strikes me that we've been waiting a long time for this deal to get cut, and in that time, things have not improved for Greece. In that time, Greece has not become more austere. Greece has, not picked up on its economy, and so it's probably closer to falling off the side. So now, in the absence of further efforts by Merkel and some kind of denouement by Greece, what happens? How would this damage the EU? How would it damage the economy of Europe? And what, if anything, can Merkel do about that?
Yeah. Well, Greece has been called the sick man in Europe, it's the sick economy. And given a common currency zone, this sickness really spreads easily, and isolating a country with the same currency is very difficult. At the same time, Greece cannot devalue the euro so that it can increase its exports outside. So really there's not much room for maneuver, and they really have to agree with each other. Now, if they do have a settlement with Greece, there are going to be others like Spain will ask the same thing. They don't want austerity either, and Spain has been taking tough measures to put austerity measures in place. So I don't think it's fair that one country would get it out easy, because then everybody else would ask for it. And there have been in January demonstrations in Madrid asking for the same thing as the Greeks.
Does Merkel have the support of other leaders in Europe? And what does Barack Obama, is he involved? Could he be involved, or would that be offensive? What other leaders are participating in this discussion?
All the 28 EU leaders are there, and I think even the Swiss probably and the others of the Europe, not in the Eurozone meetings, but it does affect the Swiss economy, the Turkish economy, because they're all in this European free trade area. But it's only the EU finance ministers for now. I don't think the US would be bothered with this crisis just yet. Because Greece is fairly isolated. I mean, I think they do trust Merkel, to keep stability here in Europe. And of course, then there's Britain, which is doing quite well. But I think if things get out of hand, you never know. You could see Greece exit from the EU or the Eurozone for some time, I think.
Yeah.
It's not improbable. That's the talk around Brussels.
Okay, we're going to take another short break, Gauri. It's Gauri Khandekar. We speak with her by Skype. She is in Brussels. She's part of FRIDE, F-R-I-D-E, which is a European think tank. And the other office for FRIDE is in Madrid. So we're going to come back after this short break and talk about what happened I guess it's another incident happened in France in a cemetery. We'll talk about that right after this break.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, it's Monday, and it's midnight in Brussels, and on the phone, on the Skype, we have Gauri Khandekar with FRIDE. She joins us for a discussion of news from the East. And the one item that we'd like to talk about now, Gauri, is what happened in France. There was an incident in France in a cemetery, an anti-Semitic incident. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, there were hundreds of Jewish graves that were desecrated at a cemetery in eastern France, and this was near the border with Germany. So they were vandalized, and they were daubed with swastikas and Nazi slogans. So this is again coming at a time which is not really a good period, let's say, in French politics as well, but also in society, which is going through a real debate on religious matters and even anti-Semitism, and it's really sad to see that. And then today there was a major argument between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said all Greeks should come, all the Jews should come back to Israel because that's their real homeland and they would be safe. And the French and German leaders have been very vocal in saying that no, that the Jews are safe in Europe, and then this is just a political stunt, because elections are close. So.
See, that's very interesting. I mean, I remember, after the Charlie incident, Netanyahu, there was news for the proposition that some Jews in France wanted to go to Israel. They were moving out of France, even though their families had lived in France for generations, for hundreds of years, and they saw this anti-Semitism as a reason to leave, go to Israel. But now it appears that Netanyahu is fanning the flames on that, and he's trying to actively encourage them to come. He might have some takers, These incidents, murders, and desecrations would make, a French Jew pretty concerned about the future of the Jewish people in France. There must be a lot of concern among that community, don't you think?
Yes, I have Jewish friends, and they do appear worried. And this is not a good direction to go in. But honestly, Jay, I think that this has come up. It's really strange for me that this has come up now in Europe, and you couldn't see it, just a year back or 2 years back. It was something related to, of course, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it wasn't anti-Semitic or, anti-Jew in here in Europe. So it's really recent, at least in public or in the news or in social media, Mm-hmm. But what really gets to me is that nobody really deals with the matter. For instance, you have Netanyahu who says, yes, come back. But this is not the way. I think there should be a dialogue with the population here,
Yeah.
Or he should encourage the French and the German leaders or any other countries to really have a dialogue with their own people and to ensure the safety of every religious community.
Yes.
But personally, Jay, if I may, I find one thing very funny, is that this symbol of swastika which is used. I'm Indian, and you will find the swastika everywhere. It's a Hindu symbol for peace and protection. But nobody even says that to whoever is vandalizing that. Sorry, what are you doing, This is a Hindu symbol. It's a religious symbol. And you just need to say that, or, just clarify these silly little things which frankly I think is really funny in this time and age,
Well, do they know, or do they have some idea of who did the desecration in the cemetery? I mean, it's a pretty substantial desecration, 400 graves. Did they catch anybody? Did they identify anybody? Are they saying that it was a Muslim crowd that did that, or they just don't know?
No, they don't know yet. There's some special investigative team that is there, but and I think they've kind of held like 5 teenagers, but I don't think it's really something that is I think it's just like 5 teenagers. That's the last thing that the local news have showed.
Yeah.
The 5 teenagers were held.
Well, is this subject to the same kind of reaction that the Charlie murders had? I mean, nobody was hurt or killed except the graves. And I'm wondering if there's been any reaction in France or anywhere else in Europe on this particular incident. Maybe it's too early, maybe because we don't know who did it yet. It's too early. But do you have a sense that anybody is reacting such as the way they reacted after the Charlie murders?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, people are not giving it that much importance, and I really don't think that it deserves to be put out or receive any kind of publicity, because it's not worth it. It's a silly, bad act that was done probably by youth, misled youth or, drunken youth even. and it doesn't deserve attention of people, and to, as you had mentioned, to fan the flames, kind of.
Yeah.
I think it's good that it remains low profile.
I want to take you from there to, the general tenor, the tone and tenor of Europe these days. I mean, although I'm happy to hear about the Ukraine deal, just wonder if there's a sense of malaise here, a sense of disaffection with government, with the EU. What does this tell us, these incidents we're talking about? What do we need to know about the way things are working in Europe? Is the EU working, or is this a suggestion that maybe it's not?
Our think tank is preoccupied with the exact question. Basically, this year our main publication was dealing with disorder, how others deal with disorder, but how the European Union should deal with disorder too. And there are so many steps that would need to be climbed up, for Europe to really be able to deal with disorder. But the mood here is really winter and crisis mode, and it's gloom. There's not much that seems to be working. There's no big project that has come out from the EU, like the euro currency, for instance. And there's no kind of feel-good project that has come about. So for the moment, there is the EU, and really I think there's peace with the EU. There's the EU, and then that's why there is peace in Europe. But I don't think it's doing that well at the moment, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere either.
Okay, well, we'll cross our fingers, and we will check in with you every couple of weeks, if you don't mind, to follow up on things. I just want to ask you one more question, Gauri, and I'm envious. You went to Madrid recently, your last trip on the continent there. Can you give us a snapshot of how it is and how Madrid is, and why should I travel to Madrid? Tell me that.
Okay, in one word, it's wonderful. Madrid is lovely. Even when it's not sunny, people are lovely, people are nice, the food is great, it's vibrant, architecture is so beautiful. There are wonderful museums, there's the royal family, there are beautiful parks. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but then you just end your evening with tapas and the dances, and it's so lively. I mean, you walk around Madrid and you feel alive again.
I was in Madrid in 1965, right after law school, and I met a fellow on the train who took me into his home. His name was Jose Real, and he lived at Calle Calvario Número 5. And I spent 2 weeks with him in his home, and we went out every night with the tapas and the beer. And I saw a lovely side of Madrid that I will never forget.
Yes, do come again, Jay. Come to Madrid.
That's Gauri Khandekar. She's a think tank person with FRIDE, operating in Brussels, but also visiting Madrid with FRIDE. And we are talking about news from the East, news from Gauri, news from Europe, with our show called Midnight in Brussels, and we always so much enjoy it. Gauri, thank you yet again, for another update and discussion, and we'll be back to you in 2 weeks or so, and we'll do it again forever, okay?
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gauri.
Bye.
Bye.